we go straight to this today's session?
I mean, you've mentioned most of it already. Like you said, I'm a science student at Morgan State University. I recently interned at Microsoft also. I was born and raised in Nigeria. Um, I love serving, like you mentioned. I have a flair for leadership also, making sure guiding things in the right direction and providing mentorship opportunities to people and sharing my experience. So that's a little about me, which you mentioned mostly already.
Wow,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you everyone for joining this live session. So let's go straight to today's topic, mastering the coding interview. So what's the best approach to structuring your study plan for coding interviews, especially if you are just starting out? The truth is that when you receive a coding interview, wow, that means that you have a good resume. Good luck to
Mm-hmm.
you. So now the question now is, how do I prepare myself? Especially, let's say that this is my first time I received. I could remember the first time I was told to come for a technical interview. I was scared. I don't know what to expect. So
Mm-hmm.
now for somebody so now for somebody just starting out, what is the best approach to structure your study plan? For any coding interview.
To start with, knowing the fundamentals of like programming, which if you're getting a technical interview, you've probably gone through that process already. So starting up with the fundamentals, focus on data structures and algorithms. You might have taken that class already. So once you have all of that in place, now you need to start like practicing. And this is why you need to do all of this before you even get to the step of like you're receiving a technical interview. So there's the season where you have to practice and get prepared, stay ready so that you don't have to get ready when that opportunity shows itself. And staying ready means you're practicing constantly. There are different platforms you can use in practicing, like Leet Code, HackerRank, Code Wars, and the rest of it. Also setting like a daily consistent, might not be daily, might be every other day, but daily consistent schedule that you would follow in practicing like lead code problems. And also there's something called pattern recognition. Like in technical interviews, when you solve technical questions, they all have a certain pattern that they would follow. So learning those different patterns, like is this an array question? Will this involve tree? Will this involve like a binary search? Will this involve me using a hash map or what have you? So learning those different patterns that may come up during the interview is also going to be key. Another way that has been helpful for me, and one of my friends introduced me to this, I think is even on the live right now, neetscode.io. Using neetscode.io, it has a set of 150 problems that have been laid out that you can go through. And if you're able to go through all of those different questions, you can be sure that if you encounter any questions, it will be something you're familiar with or something that you've seen before. So those are the few things that I would say works. Also, practicing interviews, like you doing mock interviews, is also helpful because when you do mock interviews, you put yourself in a position where you're comfortable enough to be able to demonstrate a real world, what a real world interview would be like. So mock interviews are also very helpful.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I know too well that mock interview is very, very helpful because I was opportune to do one or two things this time around, and I could see how it has shaped me, in preparing for an actual interview. Just like what you said, mock interview is important, and secondly, also, he said something about lead code, understanding the structure. Thank you, Femi, for sharing. Yeah, so understanding the structure, the lead code, and understanding the I mean, okay, I have a question following that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how important is it to master time complexity analysis? But before you answer that question, I have an
Sure, sure.
because you talk about understanding the pattern. Do you
Yeah.
mean that there are some organizations that they have there's a way they set questions? So do you mean that we should try to study, okay, for this organization, this is how they set questions, these are topics that they usually um, focus on. Should we focus on that too?
Okay, so that is not specifically what I'm saying, but that is also a good point. If you go on Leet Code, they have questions arranged according to like the frequently asked questions by different companies, and they list them by like companies. So these are the questions that Amazon would ask you, or frequently asked questions that Amazon has asked, or Bloomberg, or Microsoft. So they are listed according to that. But when I mean pattern recognition, and it's in that link that I sent, pattern recognition in the sense that there are certain questions you would see and you would realize that, oh, I'm going to use an array for this question, or this is an array question, or this is going to be done using hash map, or this is going to be done using a tree, or I'm going to be doing binary search or sorts with this. So recognizing, being able to see a question and recognize the pattern that it's following, that, okay, this is the concept I'm going to use in solving this problem, is very helpful. So if you can learn those different patterns, then it helps you to be able to like solve questions faster when you see it, or be more comfortable when you see questions like during an interview. So if you check out that link, it has all those patterns like arranged in a list of like, okay, this, and this, and this are array questions. When you see this kind of question, this is a binary question. When you see this type of question, it's a graph question. If you see this kind of question, it's a tree question. So those different patterns are like what you want to study, to be, that will be very helpful for you like during interviews.
Well, thank you for the clarity. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. So how important is to master time complexity analysis, and how should one approach improving their skills in this area?
Yeah, time complexity is actually very important. Like everyone, I used to be like, why are interviewers always asking like time complexity here and there every time? And I'm like, this is not useful, or it doesn't make sense. But during the course of my internship and from like experience, I have realized that time complexity quickly and tremendously translates into money, and you'll be so surprised. The team I worked on, we ingested over 100 exabytes of data in just a day.
Wow.
Now, that is just the day, 100 exabyte. I'm not talking about gigabyte. I'm not talking about terabyte or petabyte, exabytes. Um, so imagine you have an algorithm that is not fast enough or takes up a lot of space. That translates into like millions of dollars in acquiring like storage space or acquiring compute capacity to be able to like process all of this data. So time complexity becomes very important in situations like that, where like you're going to be, I know like when we are working on our own project, we are working with like less than 20 megabytes of data, or we're processing less than 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte of data. But once you get into like industry and the world, it tremendously and exponentially like increases to the point that it becomes very important for you to make sure that your algorithm is as efficient as possible. Make sure it is saving as much space as possible, which is why you see sometimes during interview, they'll ask you what is the trade-off between the space and the time complexity of this algorithm. So are you trading off space for time, or are you trading time for space? So you want to understand that concept as much as possible, because it will be helpful during like interviews. And I have like a link for,
The less feminine beats and
oh, sorry, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, okay. Maybe I'll just share the link later on. But there's this free code camp. I'm sure many might have heard of it. They break it down very well, the way time complexity works, and gives you like a good understanding of that. Probably towards the end, I'll share that link. But time complexity and big O notation, it's actually very important. It's not anything crazy, but they would always ask you during interview, and being able to speak to it just shows that, okay, you are familiar with it. And if they employ you or they bring you in for an internship and you're writing code, that you have that at the back of your mind, basically. So it's just important to know it.
Oh wow, thank you so much. So they want
Yeah.
us to put in mind when anything we are coding, any project we are working on, the time it
Yes.
takes to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is very important for real. Look at this
Yeah.
example of the project you just mentioned. So
Yeah.
now let's go to the next question, please. So, what are the most common mistakes candidates make during a coding interview, and how can they be avoided?
The number one thing, and like this is literally where your interview starts for real, is you jumping into coding without asking questions. Like over because of like my internship and experience, every time I meet like a senior software engineer, a principal software engineer, I always ask them like these questions about how they go about their interviews and all that. And the first thing they all say is they always give you a vague question. Like they know that the question they are giving you, you cannot solve it without asking questions. So if you go ahead and try to solve the problem without asking questions, right there, they're already marking you down. So the first thing is when you get a question, read it out loud, which is kind of like practice for communication. Read out the question out loud because you reading out loud, you're hearing it again and it's making more sense to you. And you begin to realize that, oh, this information is not here. Oh, I don't have this information to be able to solve this problem. And then you start asking follow up questions. And this is exactly what they're expecting because in the real world, industry world organization, you would be faced with so many problems that you don't have the full picture of it. And the only way you can get the full picture of it is by asking questions. So that is part of what they are looking for during these interviews. Are you able to look at a problem and realize that, oh, certain things are missing that I need to ask questions to be able to get this thing. So that is one mistake that I feel people make that is important to clarify, ask clarifying question, also like break down the problem. I do this thing of okay, now that I've asked the question, I understand the question. I go ahead and type the objective. So I literally like type in I comment out like this part and I be like objective. So the objective of this problem is to find this and this and this and that. Because now knowing the objective as you're walking through the problem, you have that in mind and you're not like going out of bound or going below bound. So writing the objective down is very helpful. Also writing down what your return is going to be. Like, am I returning an array? Am I returning a string? Am I returning an integer? So just highlighting those few things are like very important and also thinking out loud like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you're every step you're taking like literally technical interview you should be talking throughout. There should
Wow.
not be a point where you should be silent at all.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so everything that is going on in your head you should be saying it out and that is what they want. They want you to literally be voicing out your opinion. Is kind of exaggerated because you might not do it in industry, but it is a there is a very thin line there in the sense that in industry or in real world you're going to be working on things by yourself and you would need to make that point, get to that point where you would actually need to voice out whatever you're doing to someone, be it your teammate, your manager, your lead on the team or something. So they want to see you be able to articulate what you're trying to do in words because communication is important. You need to be able to communicate whatever you're doing regardless. So it is important to talk throughout your
Keep
interview.
talking.
You shouldn't be silent. Don't stop at all. Whatever it is that is going through your head, it's better you're voicing that out. And most times the interviewer will be like, "Oh, I realized you mentioned this earlier. How about you try it this way?" Because you need to realize that these interviewers are not there to see you fail. So the fact that you're speaking out your thoughts, they will sometimes draw you back and be like, "Oh, you mentioned this. Maybe you should try it this way." But if you're keeping quiet and trying to implement it your own way by just typing the code or typing your problem out, then they are not able to follow up and like
Wow.
assist you where you might go wrong. So think out loud.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Just like what you said, they give you vague questions. The
Mm-hmm.
questions they know that you need to ask questions before you can solve it. So, which means that there's a need for you to communicate with these interviewers. You also said something I should keep talking, and I like that aspect
Yeah.
because they want to know what you are thinking, right? So it's opportunity for them to know to interact with you, and that speaks so
Mm-hmm.
much about your communication skills. Thank you so much for that. That's very
Just to add one more thing to that, this was also a question I asked one of the principal software engineers that I met. most of them sometimes would give you a problem that you can never solve in the amount of time that you have that interview. But basically, he said what he's just looking for is how you're thinking, which is why I said don't be quiet at all. Just keep saying it out, whatever you're thinking, even though you're not sure of what you're doing, because they already know you're not going to be able to solve the problem because sometimes it's unsolvable. Like the question I had during my Microsoft interview was about quadratic equation. And when I saw that, I was like, what is quadratic equation doing in coding? I later met this person at Microsoft when I was working, and I asked him, and I was like, yeah, that there was no way you were ever going to solve the problem, but I just wanted to see how you thought about it, basically. So literally just say out whatever you're thinking, communicate with the person, throw questions back at the interview and be like, oh, what do you think about this? They'll give you feedback and tell you, oh, okay, try this or try that or do it this way, or how about we try it this way? So communication, basically. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for this. This is very, very helpful because we just used to believe that. I think because we are used to the classroom system where they give us question and
And we
you
want to
just must solve
solve
it.
it at the end of the day. Exactly.
You
Most of
just
them,
must
they are
solve it.
not looking for like a final resolution or answer at the end of the day.
And
Yeah.
it's not exam.
Exactly.
Like cover the book and say, "Ah, I'm not talking, I'm not talking." I think the system has affected us a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't encourage us talking to our, like they will set question. You can't be asking your examiner what's the meaning of this question, you know. So I think this is one of the things that we need to understand. Asking
Yeah.
enough questions. Wow, thank you so much. Thank you. Then another question, Paulino. So, which data structure? Okay, before I go there, can you walk us through? I think you've done something like that. Just
Mm-hmm.
summarize. Just walk us through how to break down a complex problem in a step-by-step manner, especially when you're unsure of the solution. Like now, you're unsure of the solution, right? Like quadratic equation. When you saw it, you were like, "What's this?" So, how
Mm-hmm.
were you able to? Can you please share your experience on that? How were you able to break down the problem and solve it?
So, like for this same thing, kind of like what I said earlier, most of these questions are not made to be solved. So the first thing is start asking questions like, what is this? Like when I saw that quadratic equation, the first thing that I think I asked was, that what is going to be the output of this, or that you gave me like an equation but there are no inputs, so it basically just gave me a plus b, and if you've seen the quadratic equation is like a whole square root a plus b squared multiplied by b minus c or something. So I was like, okay, there are only letters. Are they going to be variables assigned to it? So just asking questions first of all, because there's no way you're not going to have a question to ask, because I don't think they'll give you a question that when you see it, you know what it is. So ask questions. After asking questions, I think the next thing that I do personally is, like I said, I write down the objective. Okay, what is the objective of this? The objective is to find the result of this, or to return a string, or to return an array. Then after that, you want to break the problems into smaller portions. So like that quadratic equation, if you look at a quadratic equation, you can section it down into different aspects where I'm solving what is inside of the parentheses, I'm solving what is under the divider, I'm solving the square root itself. So break the problem down into smaller parts and then attack it from there. And then another thing, like I mentioned earlier, is recognizing the pattern. So, what is the pattern that is used in this particular question? Is it going to be an array? Is it going to be and am I going to be using hash maps? Am I going to be using tree or binary? So, try and recognize what the pattern is, for that, and then also like kind of walk through this, and this is all before like coding. Like I've had interviews where I have gone through the whole interview without actually writing any code, where I'm just stating down or just like communicating what I plan to do. And the interview, I was like, okay, I think I have what I want already. And it was a positive interview
Wow.
just by me walking through thought
Wow.
process and pseudocode without even writing actual code. So there are certain situations like that. So once you have your objective, then now walk through the problem with like actual examples. So you can be like, okay, if A is equal to, let's say A is 5 and B is 6. If I put A as 5 here and B as 6 here, A plus B is going to give me 11. And this is going to be what the output is. And you walk through that process with your interviewer before you even write any code, and then you look for like edge cases. So what if I was given a zero, zero divided by one? What do you want the outcome to be? Do you want me to return an error, or do you want me to return zero? So situations like that. So just walking through the problem with like an actual example, and just like mentally visualizing what you're trying to do before you even start
Visualize them.
coding. Yes, mentally visualizing what you want to do
That's a good
before you start coding. And that is the stage where the interviewer is going to be like, oh, how about we try it using this instead of this? How about we try this and that? So that is very important. And then from there, now, most times you might still have time. Most time, the time might have been gone. But trust me, the interviewer has gotten what
they
they
want.
want already from that interaction. So that's like kind of like the thought process I follow, or the step I follow for like solving problems.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing this. I learned so much. Number one, communicating, try
Mm-hmm.
to understand the problem. Secondly, try to break down. You talk about breaking down the problems into smaller section.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Then you talk about visualizing it, trying to. You also said something. First thing, what's the output? I think that is very very
Yeah,
important.
like the
The
objective
objective.
of. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then the visualization, writing the pseudocode, let them see what you are trying to do. Then
Mm-hmm.
immediately you're able to have that. Man, you can start the
Yeah,
actually
like
it's not a
a
problem.
lot of them will tell you that I can teach anyone how to code. I can even ChatGPT can write the code for you, but I can't teach you how to think. I
Mm,
can't teach you how to look at a problem and be able to solve it by thinking about solution to the problem. So that is literally the most important part of it. Yes, they want to know that you can code and you have the proficiency in whatever language that you code with, but the main thing is, can you solve problem? Like for my Microsoft internship, the programming language I was working with was not a programming language I was familiar with.
wow.
And my manager knew that from like the beginning, but it was like, you'll be fine. And I was able to do it without knowing the programming language. But because you know the basic foundation of it, and you have that problem solving mentality, and that is literally what it takes to be able to like go into it and come out successful.
Successful.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for that. So I think you've said something on data structure essential for technical interview. So you have okay. I have one question, but this is
Mm-hmm.
for those without CS background. So let's say that for those without CS background, the way they learn programming is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
They first learn through maybe web design development, maybe, and by the time they get to the coding interview, it's no way.
Yeah.
It's not related to like the web they are trying to like they have built proficiency on. So the question I have now is that which data structure would you recommend for these people, for people without the CS background? Which data structure would you recommend for them to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and how can candidates build a solid foundation with them? So I don't know how you want to answer that question.
Um, the way I would approach that, which is very important for you to always have like foundational knowledge, or knowing the theoretical aspect of this problems or this concepts, it is actually very important. So even if you've come from like a non-traditional background where you like got into programming directly, got into web development, there's always that opportunity for you to call yourself back and, okay, let me understand the theory behind this. Because if you understand the theory behind it, then solving the problem or getting back into the field would not be hard. And this was something that I did before, most of like during recruiting season last year. So I did data structures like almost like 3 years ago, and I needed to like refresh my memory on it. So I literally went on ChatGPT and was like, okay, what are the common data structures and algorithms that I use in interviews? And it literally listed out like array, linked list, stacks, queues. Now it has listed all of those things, hash maps, trees, and graphs. Then the next thing I was like, you're going to be my interview tutor. I want you to break all of these concepts one by one
Wow.
and give me examples for examples of questions that could come out in interviews and explain the theory behind it. And ChatGPT literally went one by one. It started with the first one, arrays, explain what arrays was. And it's going to explain in a very short format. It's not going to be like you're reading the whole textbook, but trust me, you get the gist of it from that. It went through that process, gave me examples, and then I in the prompt that I gave it earlier, I was like, okay, when I say next, go to the next data structures and explain it. Um, I kid you not, during my interview, I had a question about stacks, like the data structure stacks, and just because I didn't know how to implement stacks, but because I knew the theory about it, I could articulate it very well. The question that I had for my interview was not related to stack, but the interviewer went on to ask, "Oh, what if you wanted to implement this with stack?" And she
Wow.
didn't want me to code anything; she just wanted me to talk about it. But because I had done this with ChatGPT prior to the interview, I was able to easily articulate how a stack works, where it is used, examples of how to use a stack, and how to be beneficial using it in this situation, and like what the time complexity and all that was. So that was even without me knowing how to implement it. That was just me knowing the theoretical background and concept of it. I was able to like articulate that to the interviewer, and she was like, "Oh, great!" And literally that was it. So knowing the foundation is very good because you sometimes be in a situation where you might not be able to implement it, but because you understand the theory behind it and you understand how it works, you can speak to it. And the fact that you can speak to it says that you have knowledge about it. That if you were to be put in a position where you have to implement this, because you have the knowledge, you'll be able to successfully implement it, even though you cannot do it on the spot right there. So knowing the theory is important. You can also use YouTube videos. So like going back to the initial question, how can someone from like a non-traditional background just highlight the things that you want to work on, like the different concepts you want to follow up and work on. Like I said, arrays. And if you go through that pattern that I mentioned, all of these data structures are there: arrays, linked lists, stacks, binary trees. So walk through those concepts and just understand how they work, know how they function, know what they are used for, know their use cases and things like that. If you can understand those background, then you'll be good for like an interview, even though you're not from like a traditional background of like going through a computer science. Because at the end of the day, we go through like the whole computer science course and everything, but at the interview, they mainly ask us about data structures and algorithms. So if you can learn like these concepts, then you'll be good for like an interview also.
Wow. This is
Yeah.
original for those. Thank you. Wow, with this, I believe that with this origin that we have on this live session, everybody should be able to smash any coding interview. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So for those with non-technical background, see, you can just go to your ChatGPT, make use of these large language models, make use of these
Mm-hmm.
AI tools
Yeah.
to educate yourself. To tell, okay, what are the questions. You can say what are the questions Bloomberg has, what are the questions Microsoft has, what are the questions Google has, and can you break it down for me? Just
Yeah.
like this is great. Thank you so much. Thank you. I believe you solved this problem. I believe you solved this problem. So now let's go to the next question. Thank you so much, Femi, for this. How should candidates approach dynamic programming? This okay, let me because you have you have very you have a very strong background. I believe you can address this because I know it's a very tough question.
Mm-hmm.
So, how should candidates approach dynamic programming questions, which tends to be some of the most difficult? Like even some, it's not the most difficult.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, how can a candidate approach that? You can consider
I
two categories of people: people with technical background and non-technical background.
yeah. I mean, like when it comes to like dynamic programming questions like this, it's very difficult. You're not going to just learn it. This is where consistency and practice would help you a lot because if you keep practicing and you're consistent with it, you would build enough stability that where you see when you see this kind of questions, it won't move you anymore. Um, I think the way to approach it is still kind of like the same thing where you ask questions because there's going to be need to ask questions because for these ones they are even more complex, and if you don't ask questions, then trust me, you can't move forward with it. And I think sometimes you should give yourself grace, and give yourself grace in the sense that you might get into an interview and not know it. I've definitely had interviews. I think last year I had an interview with what's the name of this company? I've forgotten the name of the company, but they gave me a three question with puzzles. They had like puzzle pieces, and they're like, okay, how would you write an algorithm that puts all the puzzles together in the right format? Because now this is dynamic and complex because even as a human being,
It can't
if
be.
you were to be given a puzzle, it would take you a number of tries to be able to like put a puzzle together. So imagine trying to do that with code. So, which is why I said it takes consistency and practice to be able to build up the ability to be able to like solve problems like that without any issue at all. So, practice, start from like the easy questions to the mediums till you get to the hard. This kind of problems are always on the hard side, which is where you see like trees, graphs, and stuff like that. But with enough practice and consistency, you'll be able to like get through it and just follow like the normal process of asking questions, breaking down the problems into smaller parts, and all, and you should be good.
Wow. Thank you so much.
And another
Okay.
thing, which is why I mentioned about knowing the theory behind it, for most of these questions, they might not even want you to solve it, they might just want you to walk through it. Especially for like internship level, they might just want you to walk through the problem opposed to like actually solving it because of how dynamic or complex it might be. It might not be enough time for you to solve it right there, but they might want you to walk through it. So at least knowing the concept and the theory behind it would go a long way because you can speak to it, you can articulate it, even though you can implement it on the spot. You have an idea of what it is, you know how it works, you know how to implement it mentally, even though you might not be able to like physically type it down. Because sometimes you see these questions and you become so nervous and
Exactly.
everything you've learned start leaving your head. So it's good to like know the theory and understand how it works. Yeah.
So you don't need to cram to your interview. Just understand.
Yeah, you don't need to cram. Yeah, because like if you are following the steps of like asking questions, um, asking questions does a lot. Like I've gone into an interview without preparing for it because I was not aware of the interview and everything, but just getting into the interview and just like asking a lot of questions really broke down the whole question to the point that I was able to solve it without having the maximum amount of preparation that I wanted to have for it. But if you ask a lot of questions, be curious and break things down, basically, you'll be able to like go through that.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Because of our time, and let's move to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can one develop the habit of thinking out loud during a coding interview to showcase their thought process effectively? This is because while you are studying, learning, you are doing it privately. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody is learning. I don't know whether people learn together coding. I don't feel like you can learn coding in groups. Like
Yeah.
they can, of course, you can do some exercises together and explain, but it still requires you, you know, being in one corner and developing yourself. So now,
Mm-hmm.
how can somebody now develop the habit of thinking out loud, you know, during a coding interview because it's a lot, and you don't want to fumble, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to say something that is out of, there are some things that you may probably say and they just be like, this person I can't even take. How can you take
Mm-hmm.
this level? So you be scared like, should I say this? Should I not say this?
Yeah.
So how can one develop the habit of thinking out loud? Very
I
cool.
mean, the most common answer to this is mock interviews. So
Yeah.
doing mock interviews and practicing with someone is really helpful. There's this platform called Pramp. It's a free platform where you can like have mock interviews with friends and go through like interview sessions. Also, one important thing that I realize is you yourself interview someone,
Mm.
because now interviewing someone puts you in the headspace of an interviewer, and you kind of like get that perspective or point of view of, oh, so this is what my interviewer is seeing, this is what they are thinking about when they're interviewing me. You see yourself sometimes, you tell the person you're interviewing, oh, keep speaking, like I want to hear what you're thinking about, because now, so if you interview someone, you start
Good.
understanding what it actually takes to be interviewed and what people are actually looking for when they are interviewing you. So I think that's like one important aspect of things that few people should do. You don't have to be good in lead code problem. Pick a problem that you have mastered and solved, be it an easy problem, medium problem, whatever problem it may be. Pick a problem that you're familiar with and ask someone that, oh, I want to interview you. Solve this coding question and let's interact. So from there, you kind of get an understanding and get into the mindset of what an interviewer is looking for when they are interviewing you, basically. So that is one. Now, secondly, you mentioned that, oh, you don't know if people like solve coding questions together, but even in any subjects, be it mathematics, social studies, whatever, history, if you have a particular topic or subject that you're familiar enough with, what you should do is find an opportunity where you can tutor or teach someone or explain to someone. There are always people in class who might not understand certain things at time and might need someone to explain. Put yourself in a position where you are able to explain and tutor someone else, because in that process you get into the habit of explaining something that you know inside of your head, which is kind of like the same way interview works. Technical interviews work is like you're trying to explain something that is inside of your own head, and you're trying to speak out loud and think out loud. So it is the same concept when you're tutoring someone, be it in coding or any subject, any topic, any course, any class. If you can get an opportunity to tutor someone or teach someone or explain something to someone, always take advantage of that opportunity, because it starts training you on how to actually articulate what is inside of your head and act to actually like think out loud, be able to process something that is just in your head and be able to bring it out to someone to make sense to someone, because a lot of things in our head most times do not make sense because it's just floating around in our head, it's just ideas in our head. But if you built that muscle of being able to say it to someone, teach it to someone, explain it to someone, then now you know how to take words out of your head and make it make sense to someone that you're speaking to, which is kind of like how interviews work. So it doesn't have to be in coding. Anywhere you know that you know or you are familiar enough with that topic or subject or course or class, find an opportunity to tutor someone or teach someone or explain to someone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Thank you, thank you,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. So let's move to the next question. What are some of the soft skills interviewers look for during a coding interview aside from the technical proficiency? I think you've mentioned so much on this. You
Mm-hmm.
just I just say one, two, three. What are the soft skills?
Um, Communication, they value communication, which is why you're thinking out loud. Collaboration, which is why you're asking questions and being like, oh, should I use this? Should I use that? What do you think about me using this? What else? Interviewers value people that, I don't know if I should use the word nice, maybe not nice, but you have a positive attitude,
Nice. Yeah.
because at the end of the day, these people are most likely the people you're going to be working with when you actually get the job. So trust that they are looking for someone that they can work with. They don't want someone that is going to come and make their day that is already hard even harder, or someone that's going to come and give them attitude at work. So at the end of the day, they are looking for someone with a positive attitude. So I think that's kind of like the most important thing. You just have a positive attitude and be polite, be nice. It goes a long way at the end of the day, because they're also looking for how you can fit into the team. Yeah, so that.
Wow, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So how can one we have a few more questions to go. Um,
Okay.
how can one effectively practice coding challenges on platforms like LeetCode, Akaran, and make the most of these resources? How do you, because you don't want to cram, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just keep going back to this platform. So what would you advise somebody on how to, effectively practice using this platform?
One of the things I mentioned earlier is like have a consistent
Consistent.
time. So be consistent with it. If you're going to be doing it every other day, make sure you're doing it every other day. If you plan to do it every day, try to do it every day. I mean, give yourself grace in the sense that you might not be able to meet with that every time. Put a specific goal that, okay, at the end of this week, I want to be able to have gone through 5, 10 problems. Um, Neat code IO, and not leet code, so neat code with an N.
Oh,
It,
wow.
yeah, it's important because it's streamlined all of these questions. If you go on leet code, there are thousands of questions, but neat code IO I think has 150 questions that you can go through, and they are tailored to hit all of the different aspects of like coding language, of like technical interviews that you would most likely encounter. So schedule a time, be consistent with it. Look for patterns in the questions that you're solving. Like, is this array? Is this hash map? Is this a linked list? Is this a stack? And then also, while you're doing all this, try and discover the language you are more comfortable with, because whenever you go into a coding interview, they'll ask you which language are you proficient in or which language you want to use for this interview. So use this period to try and figure out which one you're proficient in and which one you would want to be using for interviews. It might not be your major language, but it might just be a language that has more tools or more syntaxes that you're familiar with that will make the interview easy for you. So discover this within this period of time. So I think these are a few ways you can effectively practice this coding questions and be able to like get the max result from it.
Consistency is key.
Yep.
Thank you. So, we're talking about these technical interviews and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want us to handle the this part of anxiety. The truth is that you already said something. You talk about mock interview. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to help you with that. So I just briefly, what are some good ways to handle stress and anxiety during actual interview?
For this one, kind of like the way I approach it, like before my interview, like almost like 5, 10 hours before my interview, I'm no longer like trying to solve any problem. This is
Wow.
just me like just relaxing my head and calming down. I remember like for my Microsoft interview, I was literally outside sharing Morgan Tech Fest flyers at a career fair and inviting like companies to come for Morgan Tech Fest. And I had an interview that afternoon, but like that's just my way of like decompressing and relaxing and getting my mind ready. And I also look at the interviews as a conversation in the sense where I know everyone, we are all in the mindset of, okay, I want to get a job. I want to get a job. I want to get to these people. But an interview is an opportunity for you to interview your interviewer
Mm.
also, in the sense that this is a company you're going to be working with. You want to know if they're a good fit for you. So I approach interviews as I'm having a conversation with someone. I approach the interview as I am also interviewing them. I'm interviewer also in this situation. You're not the only interviewer yet. So ask them questions like, oh, like at the beginning, they'll tell me about yourself and all that. You could also throw back that question. I know sometimes we get nervous and anxiety kicks in and we just like keep quiet, but you want to make sure you are able to stay focused enough to be able to, like, there's sometimes they'll say certain things and you want to be able to ask a follow-up question after that. Like, they have asked me, tell me about yourself. I'll tell them, okay, you tell me about yourself also. And they start telling me about themselves and they're like, oh, I live in this place. And I tell them, oh, I was there last year also. Or, oh, I visited this place before. Like, oh, what is it like staying in this place? Kind of like get into conversation. I think I had an interview one time also where we were just talking back and forth, and we didn't even get on to the technical interview until towards the end of it and all that. So conversation, like being able to just be relaxed enough to ask the person question also, not just them asking you questions. I know they give time at the end for you to ask questions, but if you have the opportunity to ask questions at the beginning, go ahead and ask questions. That kind of like relaxes your nerves and makes you calm. Also, learn the STAR method. The STAR
Ah.
method is important for answering behavioral questions, and the STAR method is situation, task, action, and results. So a lot of companies follow this method where they tell me about a time where you did this and this and this and that, or tell me about a time where you had a project and the project was going bad. How did you end up like solving the how did you end up getting the project to work and something like that. So you start by narrating the situation that okay, this was the project I was working on, this happened, that happened. Now you tell them the task that you had to do. The task was I had to get this and this and this and this done. What were the actions that you took? I went ahead and implemented this, went ahead and implemented that. One common mistake is that most people forget the results. At the end of the day, when you did all of this, what was the result? The result was the project was successful. It worked well. I was able to present it. I was able to I got an A in this class because of the project worked well. So always mention the results. So going through the STAR method is important. Also being authentic with your responses. That and the only way you're able to be authentic in your responses is if you've actually gone through this experience of working on projects or working with a team where you have to collaborate with other people. So also try and get involved in working on projects, working with a team. Collaboration is important for these companies because I don't think there's any company you go to that you would work on your own. You would always work in a team, especially as a new entry level or like you're just starting up your career. So collaboration, start getting into that mindset of working with people and collaborating with people on projects, and that way you have something to talk about during your interview when you're asked. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. We have spent more than 45 minutes on this call.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So thank you. You just answered the last question that I wanted to say. Well, I wanted to ask you, how should I respond to tell me about yourself? And you just said something towards the behavioral question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can just do a recap for those because that is the most important non-technical question. Tell me about yourself in a
I
very
have
way.
I have a contrary view to this. People have different
Okay.
opinion about this. Tell me about yourself question. But from my experience and like just playing around, I know when they say tell me about yourself, people start like listing out their technical qualities and what they can do, what language they're proficient in and all that. But I believe the tell me about yourself questions is actually tell me about yourself. Like, what do you do outside of like all of these technical skills? Because
Wow.
I can see all of these technical skills in your resume. I can see it in the coding interview that we're about to get into, but I want to know who you are. So, like, tell me about yourself. What has made you who you are up to this day? What are the challenges you've been through? What are the things that have what encompasses you that makes you who you are today? So that is very important. In like, yeah, because like I could tell them that oh, I go to the gym consistently. That kind of like shows that I'm disciplined. One, like certain things you tell them about yourself would already pull qualities from you that they can be like, okay, yes, this is what I'm looking for. I was born and raised in Nigeria. I moved to the United States in this, and this, and that. I love to go to the gym. I love playing soccer. I love doing this and this and that. So just kind of like try to, I mean, you can sometimes interject, like, I could be like, oh, I'm the president of Morgan Tech Fest. I'm passionate about helping people out, serving, and so little things like that will give them qualities about you that they need to know.
They need to.
So you don't need to go too heavy into the technical part and be like, oh, I work on this language, I work on that language, I do this project and that project. You don't really need that. Tell them about yourself naturally, and this comes with practice. Like before the interview, you want to put that down in paper and be like, okay, these are the things I want to talk about. But yeah,
Oh wow. Well, like you just. This is awesome. Thank
yep,
you so much. This is premium. This is a premium. We supposed to this is premium. Like, thank you so much, Femi. Thank you for joining
yeah,
this live session.
no problem.
You said it all, and with this, I believe everybody like this is original. This is everything you need to become, to successfully, navigate any interview questions, any
Hmm.
technical interview question. And I believe it's also a bit applicable to non-technical people, and for those also looking towards breaking into this tech field, and
Mm-hmm.
because you are not going to escape this
Coding
interview because
interview. Yeah.
they are not. So if you want to get into these organizations, which means that you need this mastery decoding interview session. Thank you so much, Femi, for this great opportunity.
No
Thank you for getting
problem.
this live session. One word for this for people before we finish this
Um,
session. One word for us.
Final words, I'll say stay endlessly curious. You
Mm,
don't want to lose your curiosity because curiosity will drive you to explore, innovate, and uncover opportunities you never imagined. So keep pushing boundaries because curiosity is the spark that fuels growth and greatness. So you want to remain curious and ask a lot of questions. It helps. So yeah, stay curious.
thank you so much. Thank you for this.
Yep,
And thank you for this live session. Thank you everyone for joining today's live session on Master Recording Interview by Femi Mebude, who is also a software engineer at Microsoft. Thank you all for joining.
no
Hope to
problem.
see
Thank
you.
you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me also.
Yeah, thank you, Femi.
Bye.
Bye.